Hello Six Beasts and welcome back to War Thunder. This is the T-34-57 1943. This is a premium tank in the Soviet tech tree at battle rating 4.3 in one of the strongest lineups in the game that still somehow managed to lose almost every match. But this is a very special tank to me and something that I find is very underrated. It is armed with a 57mm cannon, which has an amazing muzzle velocity and amazing penetration for this battle rating, making it one of the best tanks that the Soviet gets access to. That said, this match is not really about the tank itself. Instead, we are going to be talking about the importance of binocular sniping, or Bino sniping for short, how you can use it to improve your own game, and, well, specify why exactly I've chosen this tank. I've touched on before that the cannon on this particular tank has an extremely high muzzle velocity, 990 meters per second, which is pretty much unheard of at battle rating 4.3, at such a low tier. And this is not on an APCR shell, mind you. Whilst this tank does get access to APCR, it really is not needed at all, because the base APHE shell already has a penetration value of around 140mm, which means that even in a full up tier, you can deal quite easily with most of your opponents. Now, of course, being a 57mm cannon, you do pay off with a certain lack of damage. However, that is not going to quite help that little Italian tank destroyer. The 57mm shell is great, but it does have some drawbacks. As we touched on before, given the smaller diameter of the shell and overall less explosive filler, you aren't going to get quite as many one-shot kills against targets that are slightly bigger than the Italian tank heads. And you are also going to be struggling off against angled armor especially. The smaller the caliber, the more it struggles with angles. That said, the high muzzle velocity, the high penetration, and especially the high reload are going to be making up for that. In fact, we are going to be having a little moment with the Panzer IV in just a second, where that reload speed of the smaller caliber shell is actually going to help us out quite a bit. Especially since you can't really make out what kind of T-34 we are. Hit his first shot, barely did any damage, and him expecting to be able to out-reload us, him expecting that we were still the 76mm gun, yeah, he just sat there waiting for his own death. Now, binocular sniping. I have touched on this topic in a previous video. I've made a guide about range finding in War Thunder and how that is very, very useful. And at the end of this video, I've mentioned how you can do binocular sniping like I'm doing on the screen right now. Now, a little known fact that not many people might be aware of, in the binocular view in War Thunder, if you actually hold your fire button, your gun will point towards the binocular, towards where the binocular is facing. So you can actually control your gun whilst in binocular view, which is very, very, very useful. However, you can't quite directly shoot from the binocular view itself. Ah, but it's a trick around that. If you have your gunner view key bound very close to the key of the binocular, like for example on my case, I have my gunner view on V and my binocular view on B, so the keys are right next to each other. What you can do is, whilst you are in binocular view, you can quickly switch to your gunner view whilst holding down the fire button, and it will immediately fire the gun. And since your gun is perfectly aimed from being aimed in the binocular view, it will hit pretty damn accurately. Now you can of course just stay in the gunner view if you want to, or you can do what I do, which is quickly switch back to the binocular view, which gives us an elevated point of view and makes it actually easy to spot the enemy. Usually when you are firing from the gunner view, you're going to be having quite a bit of gun smoke in your sights, and by using the binocular view right afterwards again, you get a clearer image in case you need any follow-up shots. The binocular shooting has also another added advantage. Given that the POV of the binoculars is sitting higher than the tank itself, you can actually use this to your advantage. For example, if you are sitting in a bush and you can't quite see the enemy with your regular gunner's sight. This happens. Bushes do obstruct your vision. Unless you're using some hyper advanced ultra low quality settings, the bushes will obstruct your vision. However, if the bush is not quite tall enough to block the bino sight as well, you can still get perfectly clear and accurate shots into the enemy. Which has netted me quite a few accusations by the enemy over my career in War Thunder. People quickly assume that you're using ultra low quality simply because you are able to fire through bushes, when most of the time you don't need that. You can simply use the binoculars. Now, this match so far hasn't been going too well. We currently are getting the cap advantage, but for most of the match we really have not been able to do that. It seems like the Germans in this match, or well, the combo of Germans and Italians, have really been everywhere at once. We just weren't able to hold a single cap. Especially stuff like that. The R3T20 at the splash rating is the bane of my existence. That little thing has a stabilized, high fire rate 20mm cannon with AP shells at splash rating like 3.3, I believe, on an extremely fast chassis. One of the fastest, if not the fastest chassis in the game, bar maybe the VT12 in acceleration, but even then it really outdoes that thing in top speed, being able to crack over 100 km/h on paved roads. I have no idea why that thing is still at the battle rating it is. It is way too strong in good hands, and it's a real issue for tanks like the T-34, which, whilst you do have just enough armor to bounce those shells in your hull, the amount of fire rate that thing can put out can easily make its way through holes in your armor. And even go through turret rings in this particular case, because this is a very similar version to the Tech Tree T-34-57, which you can use with the exact same gun, and mostly the same ammo choices except for APCR, but once again APCR is completely useless at this battle rating, so no need to take that. This, however, is a slightly worse tank in my own opinion than the Tech Tree one. Whilst you do get an advantage of having a stronger driver's hatch at 75mm instead of 45mm on Tech Tree one, you do also have a much larger turret ring, which makes it easier for the enemy to get flat shots into your armor. Not that at its battle rating the armor is really going to save you too much. You can bounce some shots given the angling of the plates. T-34s have always been infamous for that, and especially if you angle your armor properly against lower tier guns, you can bounce some shots quite effectively, but this particular tank does have the issue of a massive turret ring. Now, as I've mentioned, the Germans seem to be absolutely everywhere at once in this match, even though we have a pretty good representation of teammates all across the map, all across the capture zones. There's just R3T20s everywhere. In fact, one R3T20 just decapped the C flag whilst I'm trying to cap it back, and he is up on that hill on the top right side, and he's in fact going to be killing one of our teammates. Those things are just extremely annoying. Now we do have a pretty good representation of teammates here. We got two teammates holding out the front, where the enemy comes in from the spawn. Not quite what I would be doing right now, given that we don't quite have the cap advantages yet. My general philosophy is that spawn camping is fine, so long as you have the cap advantage. If you don't have the cap advantage, then you should be focusing on the caps first and enemy spawns later. R3 is pelting our teammate. We're going to be calling an arty strike on him, but I don't think it's really going to be doing too much. Those things are extremely slippery. Back to Bino Shooting. Now, I've mentioned some of the benefits already, but there's actually another benefit when it comes to using, for example, the binocular together with range finding, which I don't quite do in this match. Most of the engagements have not been quite long range enough for me to be needing the rangefinder, And since the muzzle velocity is so high anyways, you don't really need to compensate too much for drop. But for example, in tanks like the Brummbär or any low velocity high caliber howitzer, you can actually use the binoculars to fire from cover, do actual indirect shooting in War Thunder, like artillery that it's kind of supposed to be. The way to do this is, well, twofold. Either, if you have a rangefinder, you can use that to figure out the exact range to the enemy, and then use selected distance control to zero in your gun, which does zero in the gun on the binocular side as well, so you can simply shoot with a zeroed gun from binocular view, which is amazing. Or, if you have a top-mounted MG, something that not many people seem to realize, you can actually switch over to the top-mounted MG. It has its own sight, giving you that elevated POV, and you can use that to range find, by regular range finding, or even by firing the top-mounted MG and seeing where the bullets drop. This is something that I like to use with higher tier tanks, for example, where you can actually get a thermal sight on the top-mounted MG as well. At this point we are finally managing to turn over the battle. From here on out we are going to be holding most of the caps. The enemy has been pushed back pretty damn far. We are already sitting pretty on 8 kills, and now it is finally the time to actually go after the enemy spawn. Now on this particular map there is a nice little spot over here on the corner. You can see the hill on the left side, where you can actually climb slightly sideways. Another little trick, you can much more easily climb hills if you go at a slight angle than if you go straight up. This is something that I use on maps like Japan, for example, where you can put yourself in very nice little sniping spots, especially with something like this. It's actually something you're going to be seeing in the next video about the whole lineup of 4.3 Russia. It's a nasty little spot. But we're going to be using this particular one here to give ourselves an advantage, give ourselves the high ground Anakin, and just snipe straight into the enemy spawn. At this point, they have no chance of making a comeback. And given the rain, which has actually been helping us out a lot in this match, the rain has been concealing our position so far. The enemy has a harder time to spot us, and has a harder time to spot our firing smoke as well, which is actually going to save us in this particular case, because we are kind of exposed up on this hill, and the enemy is spawning all over the place and getting spawn immunity. But since the rain is concealing our position, they're not actually going to be able to spot us, which allows us to get quite a few more kills under our belt. Now once again, I am using binocular shooting to shoot at the enemy over here. The Panzer IV has still some spawn immunity, so I'm waiting for him to lose it in a couple of seconds. Take the shot, take out cannon breach and most of his crew. Teammate takes out the verbal wind, and we actually ricochet off the side. That's what I mentioned with the 57mm shell. It does have some issues against angles. Even weak side plates, like on the Panzer IV, it still can bounce, but no issue whatsoever. Churchill over there has pretty strong armor. We have absolutely no problem going through the flat side, but sadly most of his turret crew is already dead, so we're not actually going to get the kill. And once again, another problem of the 57mm shell. It simply doesn't quite have the explosive blast to effectively deal with large targets. Small targets, no problem. Larger targets, you are going to be needing a couple of shots. And finally, we're going to be trying to get rid of some of these trees in the way, and we're going to be finishing off that Italian tank destroyer in the back as well, once again using the Bino Shooting. Bino Shooting is just extremely good, and in this particular case you can actually see another benefit of binocular view. If we were in gun view right now, our sight would be angled, since we are on a slope. This can actually make it harder for you to hit your target, because not only do you have to compensate for the usual vertical drop that you see in the gun sight, but since you are at an angle, your shell drops differently from where your gun sight is aligned. And that is simply not an issue with binoculars. As you can see, our right gun sight is angled, I would say about 30 degrees, maybe less. But the binocular view is perfectly horizontal. The binocular view levels itself to a perfect horizon, which means that you don't have to compensate for any kind of angle. Even on a slope like this, or even heavier slopes, you can use the binocular to level your sight perfectly and shoot from there with no accuracy penalty whatsoever. Which makes it actually much more accurate to use the binocular in this particular case than it would be to use the regular gun sight. Frankly, I just love this tank. It's just so great to use with the binoculars, given the very high muzzle velocity. This also applies to top tier tanks with APDS shells, APF-SDS. There you can also use the binoculars very effectively. It does kind of start getting less useful at lower tiers where we have guns with lower muzzle velocities. How it serves, for example, if you don't have the range, can be quite challenging to use with the binoculars because you don't quite get the range lines in the bino sight. That's something you get only with the gun sight. However, in some tanks, like actually in this tank as well, the binocular actually has a higher zoom level than the gun sight, which makes it actually easy to spot and hit targets at range. T-34s of this era in general have very awful gun sights, and the binocular can compensate that. And with that Panzer IV going up in flames, we finish this match on 3 caps, 3 assists, 1 air kill on that BF-110 we hit earlier, and 12 tank kills in total. An absolute carnage that somehow was still pretty close if you look at the scores. Anyways lads, hopefully this video has been useful and you can now use the skill of bino sniping for yourself. As always lads, my name is MikeGoesBoom and I shall see you in the next one.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find